Hello, thank you all for, we're recording now. 3, 2. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this, what is a series of panels that will be running over the coming months. And today's panel is going to be absolutely amazing. Wouldn't you say, Vandana?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Before we get underway, something we do, I'm based in Australia, something we do in Australia before we run any events is just to do an acknowledgement to country, which recognises the Indigenous peoples on the lands that we meet today. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional owners on the lands that we meet today, with a special heartfelt respect and acknowledgement to the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional owners here in Narromine, where I'm presenting from. I'd also like to pay my respects and acknowledgement to Indigenous elders past, present, and emerging. And so thank you again for joining the panel session today. We hope that you're, well, if you're watching the recording or if you're joining us live, we hope that you enjoy today's session, and in particular, well, you just have fun geeking out with us all. We have some great panelists with us today, don't we, Vandana?
Yeah, absolutely. And this panel is all about who came first, chicken and egg, or app or security. And it is a topic of discussion. And today we are going to have amazing panelists with us to share the perspective around traditional and modern application security. From a developer point of view, when I think about adopting security, and in particular around new app development, my thoughts are now, how soon is too soon to bring in security? And when planning app development and security, you have to do security all the time. So while it's really about new apps and redeveloping or refactoring apps, there's so much to talk about. And here we are meeting wonderful Lidia, Michael, Sandeep, and Paz.
Totally. This is from, I've previously been a developer, I've been a CTO, like planning out infrastructure, and then also, being at the code front from all those different angles. This is something I've always been interested in, because like you're saying, how soon's too soon, how late's too late. But we're going to hear from some amazing panelists today. Just a quick note, if you do have questions as we're going, either raise your hand. Well, there'll be a section towards the end of the session. You can raise your hand and we'll bring you onto the panel and you can ask a question, or pop it into the chat, which we're keeping an eye on as well as we go through today. So should we introduce our panel, Vandana?
Absolutely. Let's start with Michael first. What do you say?
Yeah, sounds good. Michale Cheng is is a full stack developer with more than 10 years experience in building out dynamic websites. He's a Zen certified engineer trainer in PHP development. He currently does Ruby and Golang. Oh, I love Golang. Well, I love PHP too. He runs a Singapore PHP user group, co-founded the iOS Dev Scouts, and is an organizer of PHP Conf Asia. He runs engineers.sg out of Singapore, a not-for-profit initiative to document and support the tech and startup scene in Singapore. His latest passion project is Junior Dev SG, a support group for getting tongue-tied, for junior developers in Singapore. Michael is currently a lead software engineer with GovTech Singapore. So hello, Michael.
Hi, Steve. Hello, Vandana.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Michael.
Glad to be here.
Vandana, do you want to intro Lidia?
Absolutely. Lidia is one of my favorites. Lidia has been in the information security field for over 15 years. Her current role sees her in the position of security advisor architect at a major financial institution. Having experience in many sectors, telecommunication, retail, and financial, she's passionate and enjoys working in the frontline business initiatives, finding new and or repeatable ways solving complex problems, and being a business security enabler. She has an interest in cloud security, security design, defensive security, vulnerability management, and malware defense. She is a vulnerability member of Black Hat Asia Review Board, DevSecOps Review Board, TDI Review Board, an organizer of B-Sides Melbourne, volunteer mentor for AWSN, speaker, coach, mentor for many conferences globally, and very actively involved in information security community. Welcome to the panel, Lidia. It's so glad to have you.
Thank you, Vandana. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with PaaS, Steve.
Okay, Paz is a principal solution engineer, APJ at Snyk, working on the Snyk platform to help customers secure their cloud native applications and enable a DevOps culture while still meeting business needs. Paz has contributed extensively to open source projects and consistently blogs about cloud native architecture when time permits. He graduated from RMIT with a Bachelor of Computer Science and has worked for companies such as Snyk, Elastic, Pivotal, VMware, Oracle, and IBM in various roles. Hello, Paz.
Yeah, it's really glad to be here. That's the shortest bio we're going to get, actually. So yeah, I'm happy with that one.
Amazing. And we've got one more speaker, Sandeep.
Yeah, so Sandeep has amazing experience in delivering high-end security consulting services for customers across the globe with focus on pen testing, application security, cloud security, and DevSecOps. He's also worked in security monitoring and response teams in the past. He currently works as a consulting services director at NotSoSecure. The name of the company itself is NotSoSecure. He's a co-lead of OWASP Delhi chapter and part of organizing team of B-Sides Delhi. Hi, Sandeep. Welcome to the panel.
Hey, Vandana. Glad to be here. Hey, Steve.
Amazing. Should we get underway with our first question, Vandana?
Absolutely. So my first question is for Lidia and Michael. Do you think that application development should start with defining the security guidelines for an application to be developed? Lidia, we'll go first with you.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Love this question. I always give the analogy, and I've been using this a lot even at work, of building a house. So, you build a house, you get an architect to do a design, you have to take the designs to your local council, things need to get approved before any building can start. And then once the engineers come in, which is our developers, and they start building things, and you've always got the compliance officer that comes and checks that the electricity points are in the right place, that things are working correctly, that everything is where it should be from a security perspective, whether it's personal security or other components. I don't see building an app any different. And I'm sure today we're going to talk about tools and automation and DevSecOps and, the DevSecOps shift left sort of thing. And as I sort of was saying at the start, it needs to go back even further than that. It needs to go back that, hey, we're looking at a SaaS to do blah, blah, or there's nothing that meets our business requirements, because it always comes back to business requirements. We need to perhaps build something for ourselves. And so we've really got to get all those stakeholders involved at the start to be able to do that design. Otherwise, I think that what happens is later down in the pipeline and the dev process, things get missed. Security comes in because we forgot about security, and not just security, other members or other stakeholders. And that's where the money really stacks up. So that's the very short answer, very short answer.
Coming from a background of in development, I was a senior developer, I do agree, and I've been in the receiving end of those sort of, security lists. It's you need to fix all these things. But Michael, what's your thoughts around this topic?
Yeah, for myself, because I'm working in GovTech, so we build stuff for governments. So there's already some guidelines in place for with regards to where we can host the application. And what this gives us is constraints. What are the constraints that we have that would, say, for example, in terms of tools, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of library. So as a tech lead myself, it's good to know what our constraints are, so that we know what we can use or we cannot use. And for example, if the security requirements of an app says that it cannot be hosted in the cloud, then we can think about what we can do on premise, right? And that also gives us it also limits us in terms of the tools that we can use, but it also gives us a sense of okay, this is the playground, this is the sandbox, this is the playground, what we can do. And that gives our devs a lot of freedom in this is a sandbox, get the app built based on this what you have in the sandbox. I've had in the past where we jump into solutioning, build something, but it turns out that wait, because of the browser requirements, this thing has to work on certain browsers, and the tools that we choose cannot work on those browsers. So that creates a lot of problems for us. So we have to go back and refactor things. So finding understanding what tools we can use, and because also of the compliance that's required for us in terms of delivering the application. Once we know these things, it's a lot easier for us as an architect to design out our application, and in terms of also build our applications around the tools that we can use, right? So yeah, so security guidelines is actually one of those like requirements that could help us build application that would basically deliver the feature.
No, thank you for that. Actually, I guess on that note too is Sandeep, what's some of the security elements to be thinking about at when you start scoping an app, like even from a development point of view, down at the ideation stage, for example, like what's some of the elements do you think people should already be thinking about it at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one of the things that I always keep saying is that you should always keep the basic security principles in mind, which is like, how do you kind of maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability? While that sounds very trivial, but they're not trivial when you're implementing them. So yeah, you can take into consideration all the regular security principles, like how are we doing authentication? How are we authorizing different folks on the application? Are we implementing a least privilege model? Is there a defense in depth kind of strategy? Things like you should never trust your user input and always verify everything that's coming in the application, and all of that. But I guess where I come from, I generally advise, and when I speak to kind of dev teams, I generally tell them that you should start asking basic questions at the beginning and then try to answer them as we go across the life cycle. Now, what are those basic questions? Basic questions are: who will be using my app? What kind of data is my app dealing with? Where and how that data is being stored? What is the impact of if that data is kind of lost or stolen, or kind of things like that? We can keep asking these questions. When you go into mature organizations, you see they have a lot of like data classification, impact matrix, like if this kind of data is stolen, this is the impact and all that kind of thing. So what I basically say is that, start asking these questions yourself, and then throughout the life cycle, keep trying to answer those questions. Is this being handled properly in my application? And then with proper security resources, proper security guidance and help, I think throughout this life cycle, these security elements are addressed. Yeah.
No, amazing. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you, Pas and Michael, what is the earliest stage you've seen security be incorporated into the app development? Because you both have exposure around application development and security. So how soon you've seen that application security is being integrated or even being talked about that, yes, we need to have it as part of the ecosystem?
Yeah, I can start on that one. So when I talk to a lot of customers in my role at Snyk, and they always want to start with, okay, we need to set up our DevOps pipelines correctly with ensuring that we set up the correct security gates, breaking builds at the appropriate time. But I sort of flip that on its head and I say, well, if you look at the code that you're about to develop, the IP that you're developing for the business, for example, and from what I've seen in the industry and also with customers, 80% of that code is coming in from what we call open source dependencies, or sometimes referred to as SCA. The other 20% is that custom code itself, which is the IP that makes up your application. And I say, do you really think that at the pipeline stage, that's the right time to actually go and test your code and verify whether or not we should be promoting something like this to production? So instead, it's all around what is the tooling that's available to be able to bring scanning and the capability of embedding security mindset in the developers from day one, right? And so as a result of that, I see a big push around how can we get developers as part of while they're in their IDE or on the file system with their source code checked out, running tests through IDE plugins or through CLIs, maybe running an NPM audit if they're using Node.js, and also scanning their code through SAST, especially in the world of microservices where those scans can happen in 30 seconds or less, right? And getting visibility as they're coding what it may mean from a security perspective. And then they can bring the security teams into that conversation as well, because they can together look at the code and verify the implications that exist as part of not doing this as early as from day one when they're in the IDE.
Amazing, thank you. Just want to take a moment to, for the panelists that have just joined us, if you do have any questions, please pop them into the chat and we'll work them into the mix as well. But next question is for Lidia. How is DevSecOps, how is it shaping the world of application security? Like how is it now starting to change some of these processes that we're seeing sort of rapid adoption in?
Let me understand the question again. So you want to say it again, Steve? Sorry.
That's all right. So how is DevSecOps, how is it shaping the world of application security?
Look, I think it needs to sort of be broken up a little bit. I don't think DevSecOps is just the automation and tooling. Pass is right in what he's saying. I mean, if I can say this on the WebEx, Pass and I had the privilege of doing our university degrees together. So I started off as a dev. Pass has sort of continued down that path, and I've sort of veered off a little bit. So a lot of my life started off as a dev. And so I hope in my role, I'm able to have those discussions to say, what are we doing? Are you embedding any IDE plugins? Are you sort of, checking for those 101 types of syntax issues or vulnerabilities or whatever, as opposed to here's a chunk of code. Let's all, do a SAS scan on it, and it comes back with thousands of lines, and they go, screw you, security. Let's be honest, right? So, I mean, I think I kind of want to echo what Pass was saying, because I really agree with it. When you talk about the cultural side of it, and I don't want to necessarily get all the warm and fuzzy side of it, but not the cultural side in it, is that we've got to get our devs thinking, and so many are, and it's so great to see that it's just part of who we are culturally as a developer. We've got to say, okay, we're writing code, we use these tools, we're compiling codes, we've got these tools, we're whether it's a pen test or some of the other questions that you're going to ask later, it's not just a one-off task. It's not a matter of, oh my God, I'm getting false positives, so therefore, or I'm getting all these security issues flagging. That's okay, I'm going to ignore it and still continue pushing up my pipeline. It's a matter of raising it. What are we going to do with it? And just getting people to stop. And I think, at least in my line of my work as well, I see a lot of pressure on devs to meet the go live date. The go live date is a massive factor on ignoring some of the security issues as well, and so making sure that we're planning for those vulnerabilities that are going to come up, the criticals, the highs, any pen tests that you need to do before it goes into production. It's reshaping, in answering to your question, it's reshaping that we need to make sure that we've got secure code standing guides, secure code guidelines, secure code patterns, reusable things, so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time we code, using that open source, or using the open source stuff potentially that we trust, hopefully there's no malware embedded. So it is reshaping in the sense that we're creating another generation of how we think about coding. And that's how I'm hoping that we're seeing the positive impact of the DevSecOps, as opposed to just coding.
So can I add something to what Lidia said, if that's all right, Steve, before we ask you next? So I like what Lidia said, but ultimately, she's right. She's 100% right. The devs' true focus is to get shipping out to production software as fast as they possibly can. So if we're going to embed security in their IDEs, embed, these CLI tests, we need to make sure that they're getting false positives, and that they're not getting false positives, sorry, and then they're looking at the issues that are going to be relevant, and it's there for them to see, with also advice on how to remediate it. Because if it's not, then they're just going to be like, oh, not screw security, this is way too hard, I'm just going to push forward and start to promote this code through, right? So it's that idea of, embedding security in the developer's mindset and making them easy to work out how to remediate and fix their issues versus a time-consuming, long-winded process where they need to look at 10,000 different security issues and they're never going to know where to start.
And the other thing I just want to add on to what Pass is saying too is that a lot of security folks might not necessarily understand exactly what the pressures of the devs are. And that's something that we definitely should talk about, or not understanding the vulnerabilities that are coming up, especially if, you know, that the security person doesn't have the same, I mean, everyone's got different levels of expertise, but it's the relatability that we've got to find. What am I trying to say? It's help me out here, someone. It's the, you know, it's the connection between the dev and the security person here that we've got to find. Otherwise, Pass is right, and I see it all the time. It's too hard. We're just going to keep moving on because this is my deadline.
Actually, I was going to bring Michael in on this as well, but it looks like he's going to.
Do it.
Yeah, I agree, because as a developer, we're always under pressure. Like we got to deliver this feature on time. We got to deliver this this. And what we, at least what my team we try to do is we actually got an opportunity to pair with a security person. In our team for a while, we had a DevSecOps person who was attached to our team, and we basically got him to pair with our developers, and he was able to understand, okay, this is your code base, this is how things are done in your system. He was able to like give some recommendations and even work with the dev as they're working on the feature to tell them, hey, you know, you should be mindful of this, should be mindful of that. And that was helpful, at least in my team where we do pair programming. So it does help that there's some cross-pollination of ideas and best practices. And also the part that about bringing those tools available, making those tools available to developers. I think NPM and Bundler, for example, has made tools like Bundler Audit and NPM Audit readily available for devs, which makes it closer to our existing tool chain to actually do DevSecOps and to do security scanning. And even the ability to fix those things, like, you know, Bundler Audit Fix and or NPM Audit Fix was basically very helpful for us to kind of fix those dependency issues that we have. Yeah.
And just to add, Stephen, on the like last, so some points that Lidia, Pass, and Michael made were like really, really great points. And you know, one of the things that I like to add is like when DevOps started, we said that Dev and Ops are not working in silos anymore. So similarly, for DevSecOps, security is not working in silos anymore. So whatever you recommend, whatever we recommend or guide or kind of provide as security people, we need to work with the dev teams and the ops teams through that recommendation to make sure they're implemented properly. That's one of the big changes for me that I've seen, that, you know, you just do not kind of send recommendations and get done with it. You work through those recommendations and make sure they're implemented properly throughout the process. And like Michael mentioned, I've seen a lot of mature teams where they kind of, you know, pair up a security person in the DevOps team, and that kind of really makes a big difference.
Actually, I really like that idea too, because yeah, it does bring the two groups closer together. Anyway, I mean, they're already like the best of friends, but I think it just brings more almost the two worlds together, and yeah, in a happy union. But what's your thoughts on like what makes a successful pair programming or pair? Can we coin a new phrase, pair SecOps? No, I'm sure there's something in there. But what makes a successful program, do you think, in bringing those two together? Sandeep?
So yeah, you know, pairing is so first of all, like when security is happening inside like dev teams and kind of product is being developed, when we do pairing, so there are long-term initiatives that we need to do, that we need to take. Like the security teams as security functions need to understand what the devs would need in a long-term basis to be able to develop secure programs themselves. If you look at, you know, AppSec programs at scale, it's not really practically possible to pair a security person with every dev team or every product team. So in those cases, you know, scaling really kind of addressing scaling challenges, like am I providing enough secure design patterns for all the teams to be able to, you know, write code themselves? Am I providing all like a list of, you know, standard secure libraries? What are some security kind of, you know, best practices to be taken when developing an authentication module? What is to be looked at when looking at a kind of OAuth integration and all that kind of thing? So like, you know, in addition to, so pairing would really make sense or would really be more useful when there is enough resources and enough tools, when developers are being empowered enough And then the security architect or the DevSecOps person or the security researcher, whoever is paired, then they just, really use I like to say they would have to use their wisdom, because a lot of times with all those resources in hand as well, you have to take calls like, okay, shall I go ahead with this particular implementation or not? And that is where the security person's wisdom would come into picture. Okay, yes, you should go for this. If you should not, you should not go for this, because we've seen problems arising from these situations in the past. So the security pairing would really work well when there is enough resources, enough empowerment to the dev teams with everything that is being available, and the security person really works just as a kind of a Buddha kind of thing for kind of security related wisdom. So yeah, that's my take.
Can I just add on to what Sandeep was saying? Echo everything as well. I remember in a past life, actually my first role as a dev, and I was absolutely, because I didn't know anything about security, and the place that I was working at had secure code standards, and I wasn't allowed to use printf. Okay, for those that don't, we don't write C anymore. Okay, that's okay, I'm old. Why can't you use printf? At the time I didn't know, right? And so by having those patterns for devs to follow, especially new devs that may not have the practice or the know-how, or they've never had exposure to it, there's not as many security folks, I guess, as there are devs, and obviously it's hard to necessarily do the one-to-one matching. So, if companies are able to define those secure code standards, or implement a program like, not that I'm advocating, but something like Secure Code Warrior, where they're able to learn how to code, or do the capture the flag with dev style technology as well. They are so much fun. And something that I just put in our chat as well is that in another company I worked in, just brilliant. They have guilds for each of the different areas. So they've got the dev guild and the security guild, and everyone just goes to them and everyone learns from each other. And there's just so much information sharing, and that's why I go back to the cultural side of it, being able to have that knowledge transfer is so key, so that they feel enabled and empowered to, transfer that information to their own team members.
I think that's amazing. And even Michael says that they have security champions for this, which is very interesting, because security champions concept is very, very important to have, wherein you need to enable devs to understand security rather than forcing something on them, saying that you have to do it. Because if somebody says that I have to do something forcefully, I wouldn't be able to do it with my heart, right? And that's why we have seen the smallest of mistake can lead to a big breach. Now, when we are talking about devs, when we are talking about application security, there's something more that goes behind the scene, specifically from a security mindset when we talk about. So question to you, Paz, because you talked a bit around the newer technologies as well. So what are some things that an app should consider when it comes to deploying Kubernetes, because they are becoming the thing, and especially in the retail sector, it's being used widely when we talk about spinning up instances and whatnot. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, good question. In fact, anytime I talk to any customers or anyone that's deploying applications on Kubernetes, the first thing I say is congratulations, because it's not an easy place to get to, right? And so the reason I bring that up is, in terms of deploying applications on Kubernetes, there's many different ways and techniques around how I'm going to get my application deployed on Kubernetes. And as a result of that, that means that when we deploy our applications on Kubernetes, we more often than not get it wrong, right? Because of the fact that we just want to deploy it and we don't really look at it from a security perspective. So I'll kind of explain it if I do it this way. So Kubernetes has many different layers and components, right? So all of those need to be considered from a security perspective. So I'll give you an example. There's API communication between different parts of the cluster. That's something that needs to be considered from a security perspective. There's a scheduler that manages how workloads are distributed. There's controllers that manage the state of the Kubernetes cluster itself. There's agents that run on each node of the Kubernetes cluster. There's a key store value that runs on the cluster as well. And all of these things I'm talking about, I haven't even mentioned the application yet. I'm just talking about pure Kubernetes, right? And so every time I talk to anyone around deploying applications on Kubernetes, I bring up these 4 things, right? Because they're always central in my mind. The first one is, when you deploy your applications, are you enforcing some sort of least privilege access for the container at runtime? This one stumps me, how many people will run their application containers as root, right? And so if you're doing that, for example, any future Linux kernel vulnerabilities are more likely to be exploited when you're running as root than non-root. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but a lot of people get that wrong, right? So the other one is, are you setting CPU and memory limits in terms of what your container can consume? And they might think, well, why is that important? Well, did you know that denial of service attacks actually deprive the rest of the cluster as a result of your application not setting limits? Again, another security concept. The other thing people do with Kubernetes is they more often than not won't keep it updated, especially if they're rolling out their own Kubernetes. And if you're not keeping it updated, guess what? Again, you're increasing the attack vector from a security perspective. And obviously this one happens more often than not, to be honest, isolating the nodes on a separate network versus what needs to be on a public network itself, right? Because ultimately the apps, when you're writing applications that are then deployed on Kubernetes that are public facing, they do have to be exposed, but the actual backend API components, they should be on a separate network. But I just want to mention one more thing about applications deployed on Kubernetes, now that you've asked. A lot of people will just test the Kubernetes applications, the containers themselves, and look for any OS-based vulnerabilities that exist. And so from a security posture perspective, they're looking at what is the best base image to base my application on. But what they always forget is that the application itself isn't just the base image itself or OS vulnerabilities, it's the application components inside it as well. Now, if you remember, I spoke about if the devs are already testing their open source libraries while they're developing, they may already have a great security posture when the application is deployed and running on Kubernetes with next to no vulnerabilities. But imagine over time when this application hasn't been updated 3 months later, are you scanning those containers at runtime to see what new vulnerabilities are appearing from the application side as well, right? So that's my take there. I'll pause on that. It's a complicated topic because Kubernetes itself can be very complicated in terms of deploying applications. So the attack vector becomes more of a risk to the business than when you previously deployed applications the traditional way. So.
Thank you. Yeah, there's really good points in there. Actually, we have had a question come in sort of related to this too, particularly the containerized side of things from Andrew. Thanks, Andrew. Andrew asks, in a world of containers, how does someone in DevOps keep up to date with security vulnerabilities with open source base layer images? And I might throw that one to Sandeep if you've got some thoughts around that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like there are things like dependency checking and software composition analysis that you can keep doing. The key, like Pas mentioned already, you really have to, first of all, make sure that you've got all the security kind of configuration best practices done on the container layer, on the base image layer and all that. And then, of course, humanly, it's not possible to keep track of all the vulnerabilities. So use a combination of open source or commercial, whatever works for in your organization, things like, SCAs or dependency checking kind of solutions, which kind of keep tracks of any publicly introduced vulnerabilities that are kind of arising for things like Ubuntu, like Debian or any base OS that's kind of coming in, and keep kind of making sure that it's updated. One of the things, I mean, it's not directly related to the question, but some of the points that Pas made. And when deploying to Kubernetes, there is one thing that I've recently found quite useful that I'd like to kind of probably add here, which is a lot of people who write kind of or kind of develop things for Kubernetes, they love to use YAML files and they love to kind of write things in the YAML file. So there is a security context that is available in deployment files in YAML, and you can write all sorts of security parameters in that YAML file, which makes it so easy. Like you can write things like that if you need to run it as non-root, if you need to kind of make it a read-only thing, your file system and all that, and that's quite easy. So yeah, just kind of adding to what Pas mentioned. And in terms of scanning for or keeping track of kind of vulnerabilities on the base layer, I think things like software composition analysis, or open source projects like, OWASP dependency check could be useful there.
Yeah, very good point, Sandeep. Specifically talking about the open source libraries and dependency checks. Now, I want to ask Michael, because he's been into the dev space for a very long time. How is his experience around open source dependencies and the vulnerabilities around them? Because I want to take dev perspective as well on that.
So interesting you asked that question, because my team is dealing with an SCA audit finding right now. So, so it's kind of like it's escalation. So every time there's like, oh, we roll this out. Like recently, we roll out a new version of Rails, and we updated Rails and shit. And then wait, oh, gems have a bunch of vulnerabilities. We need to deal with those gems, right? And this escalation. Then we need now upgrade our Ruby to the new version. So it's kind of like it's never ending battle. It feels like we're always when we have caught up, we realize that there are new vulnerabilities and we need to deal with that. Then after that, and then it's like it seems like a never-ending battle. So for my team, it's like, wow, we need to deliver features at the same time. So how do we find a balance? It's very hard. So sometimes we outsource it. In the sense, we kind of get as we kind of do as government, we kind of outsource it to some vendor who will give us a report semi-annually, and we deal with that as it comes along. But it's kind of reactive. So I don't know. I feel that we should as a DevSecOps movement says, we should shift left, bring a lot more of these scanning tools earlier into the development process, so make it part of our CI pipeline in terms of our quality gate. It's something that my team is trying to do. So we set up like CI pipelines where we actually check for like vulnerabilities way before the code gets deployed into production. So we do try that, but then again, it's kind of like it doesn't block us from deploying the code. So in a way, it's still not that effective. So yeah, so it's I think, yeah, as I said, it's escalating warfare, and we kind of need to figure out how. And if we can find tools that can help us fix things, that would be great. But then I've seen in the past, auto fixes don't always fix things at the proper way. So for example, they auto fix some things, but it breaks something else, right? So yeah, we shouldn't leave it to the machines to fix things for us. So what's the next option for us as devs is to basically play additional tasks and stories, and even make it part of our definition of done. Right, we got this story where it's going out. What's the definition of done? It should include security scan as one of the definition of done. So these are things and that we have to deal with. I think it's, as a developer nowadays, it's not easy. So because all these other things you deal with other than writing code, you got to think about where you're deploying it and how secure is the environment that you're deploying it to. So yeah, lots of fun.
I guess one thing I've noticed, I've been around the tech industry for years and years as well. Oh, I feel so old now, but it kind of almost redefines the whole definition around full stack. I think it's like super full stack. Maybe it's like Super Saiyan. But I think one thing that also comes to mind here too is like vulnerability disclosure programs now. Somewhat mandatory depending, on the country you're operating out of or that your app runs out of. Lydia, what's your thoughts on like vulnerability disclosure programs and when you should build those into application, like the application development cycle? Like, should it be brought in right at the very start and then be defined alongside the application almost?
So you're going to hate my answer. It depends. and let me explain why. So like everybody on this panel, we've all been in tech for a very long time. I think, I say I started out my career as a dev, but I was also at some point a system administrator, a network administrator. We've done everything. And it never ceases to amaze me that the 101 stuff still gets left by the wayside because there's a new shiny tool. And so, I've got friends that work at an amazing, crowdsourcing company like BugCrowd. They're amazing, and they do amazing work. But I guess my question to anyone looking at like a vulnerability disclosure program or getting that on board is, do you have all the other stuff working properly? Have you implemented everything right? couple of months ago, maybe longer than that. The COVID years are slowly slipping away. I don't remember when I did this. A colleague of mine, we went out and we spoke to some of the security teams in very well established places, banking, social media companies, and we asked them, what do they do? You know, and we found that a lot of the feedback was coming back the same. If you're doing the SCA and the SAS and creating security patterns and security standards in terms of coding guidelines, a lot of those big vulnerabilities are mitigated right at the start. You know, they were talking something between 80 to 90%. A lot of that exposure was already gone because they had that robust program. And so even hardening things like if you've got, you know, an IaaS or a PaaS or whatever, you know, making sure that, you know, you got the latest AMI, or you're using an immutable image, for example, so that your patch management program is, you know, you're not relying on those long-lived images where it may not get patched for like 8 to 9 weeks, longer than that. So my thing is, my feedback on this is I love vulnerability disclosure programs, but when you've got all the other stuff sorted out, and you've got to have it stuff sorted out because it costs money. It's not cheap, you know. And if you're a really big company and you've got the financial backing behind you, you might even say, hey, before this new live system is about to hit, you know, the outside world, let's have a private, you know, vulnerability disclosure program, get the pen testers at it and see what happens before we go completely live. But you've got to have all those other building blocks in place first before you go down. That's the last thing, in my opinion, anyway. Many might disagree. I'm happy to have that discussion, but that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Lidia, because I've seen also on the similar lines that if we don't have a proper structured environment set up first and then go for the vulnerability disclosure program, there could be a lot of discrepancies and a lot of confusions as well. Now, coming to you, Sandeep, what's your take on that?
I mean, I totally agree. Like the short answer is it depends. It's always the short answer, but yeah, going a bit in detail. I totally agree that, you know, one of the reasons we talk about all this shift left and DevSecOps and all is that we want to mitigate and we want to fix things earlier in the process. We want to make things secure design. So when we are doing that and when we are ensuring that, you know, we are shipping secure kind of software, after that, if, you know, after we've gone through like pen testing and there are enough rounds of pen testing that has happened, we've dealt with a lot of, you know, low hanging fruits and everything. Now we feel like we need 5,000 or 10,000 eyes on this application over the period of 6 months, which can find something that, you know, 5 or 10 pen testers over 2-3 rounds may be able to do it. So that's where you look at vulnerability disclosure programs. Now with vulnerability disclosure programs, it's a lot tricky. I mean, you can't just, you know, spin up a vulnerability disclosure program and say that, hey, I have a disclosure program and that's it. You need to be able to triage those incoming reports as well. How is your reward structure panned out? Because sometimes, you know, the way reward structures are panned out is that it's not useful. You would 1,000 reports for XSS, but you not get a single report for remote code execution or things like that. So the rewards, so there's a lot of technical plus non-technical aspects that needs to be played out here. What I generally, when I talk to people, what I recommend is that, you know, if you really putting out your application in the public and you think that you would benefit from a vulnerability disclosure program, just put out a vulnerability disclosure policy first on your website or on your kind of, you know, and see what kind of interest are you getting. It's just like, you know, we like to call it like, okay, if you're crossing by the street and we see something wrong at someone's house, we would just like to, you know, ring the doorbell and say, hey, we saw this. That's it. That's the kind of thing that you need to start with. And then when you have enough, you know, we always keep talking about like security skills, issues, and all that kind of thing. Do you have enough triaging capability? Are you outsourcing it to all the kind of platforms that we're talking about? And there are a lot of, I'm not kind of, you know, bashing like a typical vulnerability disclosure programs, but I feel like there are like, you know, smaller steps to be taken before you go into a full-fledged vulnerability disclosure programs. And just putting out a policy which is simple, clear, and with clear guidelines for submitting issues goes a long way. I mean, people really underestimate that, but that goes a long way. There are ISO guidelines which are available to just, be able to write a simple, clear policy. Just do that and just put it out as soon as the application is public. And when you have enough, kind of traction, when there is enough scale, and when it's really like a internet scale application or something like that, go for bug bounties or like vulnerability disclosure. Yeah, that's just my. Yeah.
That's all very good points, and I think one of the elements there, and something I know I've seen in the news and just in the app ecosystems, is like you're saying, it's one thing to put out a really comprehensive policy or procedure or form or some sort of program in place, but it's another thing to then make sure you're actually doing it and doing something with it. Because I think we've always seen that from time to time. The one thing we did want to ask is, and this one's for Paz, is what are you seeing? What's the shift been like in seeing like the adoption of security in cloud native application development, deployment, infrastructure? What sort of shift have you been seeing?
Yeah, this is a good question to ask me, actually, because most of the customers that I speak to now are running their applications in the cloud, or if not, that's the journey that they want to get to. And so a lot of them will start talking to me about not just, and we've mentioned this multiple times, not just software composition analysis and SAST, right? They start thinking, okay, we're paving out infrastructure on the cloud. We need to be testing that as well and making sure that we're not inadvertently creating security issues for our applications that are running in the cloud, right? And so that is typically referred to as an IAC static security testing, right? And so that could be Terraform, that could be CloudFormation, that could be AWS CDK, or whatever that is. And this is something that we do at Snyk, is we look across the whole software development lifecycle, from a developer in his IDE with plugins and testing on the CLI, to going through a pipeline and setting up security gates, to verifying through source code management what configuration files exist in terms of what we're paving out in the cloud through IAC, and determining if we've made mistakes there, and then all the way to an application running in Kubernetes that we spoke about, because when we think cloud, it's always Kubernetes and microservices, and that's the end game. Do we have a strategy that's then clearly making sure that we're reporting and viewing vulnerabilities in real time, and against containers that are sitting in a registry? Again, another popular cloud pattern as well. So.
No, amazing. Thank you. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask one last fun question, because like we're all tech folks that have been in like tech for so many years now. And I always love asking this because, I just love seeing people's answers, is what was your first computer and programming language? And I can already see people's reactions now going, oh, it was so long ago.
So is that to our attendees or to the panelists?
Oh, well, let's go panelists, but attendees, you can also put that into the chat if you want to drop in what your first. I just always find this one interesting.
Cool. So I'll go first on this one. So my first computer was a Commodore 64. I love that thing, but anyway, it's gone. It's a distant memory now. And my first programming language was something called Ada, ADA. So yeah, I learned the hard way that procedural isn't probably the way to go forward. And even back then, like Lydia said, we both went to uni. We learned Ada back in uni there, right? Things changed really quickly from there, but that was my first programming language.
What about you, Lydia?
Gaming Commodore 64 as well. And then my mum got me some crazy laptop with a dual floppy disk boot. But the first real one was my 486 DX266, which we discussed the other night. And first language, same as PAS, Ada.
Well, we are not going to judge you on the age.
Oddly enough, I think, was it the year later, PAS, they changed it to Java for the first years, I think.
Yeah,
so, equally bad.
I was a little scared. What's this Java? What's going on?
Yeah. It was either Ada or Pascal, and then it jumped to Java.
What about you, Sandeep or Michael?
So my language was C, and that was accidental because I happened to start unlike a lot of other folks, I happened to start with security right from day one. So and everything that I was bombarded with was C applications. C, so I had to learn C, and then computer. I feel like I'm a millennial kid, so I was using with starting with a compact laptop. I think it was compact Rosario or something. So.
Nice. Michael?
My first computer, I think my dad bought me a Pentium 133 back in the day. This is, yeah, and then on the first day, we got a ISP account. I was able to download all the software to build my own first website. I remember it was a 28.8K BBS modem, and it was like dial up and all that stuff. It was really fun.
Wait, it made the noise and had the turbo button.
Yes, it had the turbo button. I'm not sure actually it does anything though. But and then first programming language, web programming language was CodeFusion, but for desktop programming language, first one I used was Access Basics, Microsoft Access. Yeah, so I was building forms and I was like trying to figure out the between two timestamps. Tell me how many hours is between these two timestamps, the kind of thing. So I was doing some hardcore Access Basic programming with basics. Basically, web application, CodeFusion was the first one I tried because it was fun. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think it was amazing discussion with all four of you. We felt that we can go on and on for the discussion that we had. We talked about application security. We talked about how devs can be involved in application security. We also talked about cloud native application security and vulnerability disclosure program. And it's always a topic wherein we can add some new pointers to it. Lydia has something from a totally different point of view to pass, and then Sandeep and Michael. It was wonderful to have like 4 perspectives from different regions. And the most important point was that we could talk about setting up something within an organization, understanding what are the strategies that can be there to take the DevSecOps program or an application security program further. Another important point that I realized that when we talk about setting up disclosure program, it's important that we understand what we have in-house set up and then ship it further, because shipping your program further, it's fine, it's good, because a lot of companies are doing it. But if you cannot fix it, that means it's as good as not doing anything. Now, I would actually go one by one to each one of the panelists to share one takeaway. Like just one liner is fine. So I'll start off here totally opposite. I'll start with Michael because I can see him on my screen first. So Michael, we'll go first with you. Just one takeaway from your perspective.
From this panel, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that security professionals do care for devs. There's a fair bit of empathy here as well. That's why I do like that, and the fact that we can openly talk about what our needs are, and we have a common interest in building a good quality application that people can use and that's safe. So I think it's good that we have an understanding between application developers and security professionals about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build an application that's safe and secure and people can use. So I think that's great.
Yeah, moving away to pass this time.
Yeah, probably a takeaway from me, and I think a lot of organizations should look at it this way: empower the developers to build secure software, right? And so that requires a DevSecOps culture, right? And it's not just tooling, but yeah, that's the one key takeaway for me. So,
yeah, Lydia.
Taking myself off mute. Start early. Start in design, build frameworks, build standards, threat model. Start as early as you can and get the relevant people involved so that you know which direction you want to take, because it's not a one size fit for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandeep?
For me, it's what Lydia said. We need dev and security guilds. We need more of those dev and security guilds.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something that Steve wanted to talk about. Steve, over to you.
I just wanted to thank all the amazing panelists and for sharing insights with us today and just sharing knowledge. And well, as always, I like to think about it just geeking out, which is what it's all about, particularly in the open source world. We're all products of open source in some way. Remember to contribute back, everyone. Anyway, I always love saying that too. But no, thank you. Big round of applause for the panelists. Thank you for spending time with us today. I know you're all quite active on social media and in different community groups. So if anyone wants to reach out, please have a look for them, and also get involved in some of the groups, some of the community stuff they're doing, because I'm always a big fan of those groups and the work that they do, just helping educate, bring people together and everyone learning. Just before we wrap up, just a few things we wanted to talk about first. SnykCon is coming up in October, so it's free to attend. One of my favorite speakers that will be there, Troy Hunt, who from Have I Been Pawned, who well has a very big database of people being pawned. So and he's always got some really great insightful stuff, but there's going to be a whole lot of fun speakers there, and some from all over the industry, just sharing knowledge and just, well, as I always say, geeking out. There's a bunch of DevSecOn meetups around region. In fact, this is the first time I'm mentioning it in an event, but DevSecOn Australia is about to launch in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that one. And maybe we'll have one of our amazing panelists from here doing a talk. Maybe. Don't want to put any of them on the spot. But there was already some great speakers lining up. And also we have DevSecOn Singapore and India as well. So if anyone watching wants to do a talk, please reach out to me or Vandana or one of the DevSecOn crew, and we'd love to have you speak there. The next panel, we're having another panel discussion in October. This one will be on a DevSecOn panel discussion. This one will be on scaling secure stacks. So stay tuned for that one. It's the 20th of October, and we've just secured the 4th speaker. So that's going to be also just as interesting. And this today was recorded, so it'll be on YouTube soon, but we'll follow up with an email on that one. I think that's all we're at time. So I just wanted to say again, thank you for everyone for joining. Thank you to the amazing panelists. Big round of applause. Yeah.
I want a picture before we leave.
Okay, everyone strike a pose. Hang on, I'm gonna do a screenshot as well. Okay, cool. All right, ready? Everyone posing? You wanna do the countdown, Vandana?
3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, that's a nice one.
I might have taken a couple too.
Yeah, we'll share it with you, and we'll also share the link with you, the YouTube link, as soon as it's uploaded on the YouTube, DevSecOn YouTube channel, so that we can share it further. But it was amazing discussion. I love all the key points from each one of you, because each one of you had different perspective about the things that we are dealing with, because these things are real. Whatever we say, that everyone is sailing in the same boat, facing all these security challenges, and how we're trying to solve it.
Cool. That's all we got time for. That's a wrap.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.